Hi, class. This is reading from files. So we're going to get our data from a file rather than the console. And you can see the advantage right away. Suppose we had 20 values to enter. No one is going to want to sit there at the console and enter 20 values. Let's make it 20,000 values. Absolutely not. We don't do that. We're not heathens. Instead, we will typically read from a file. So this lesson is exactly that. We have a file that represents some database. It contains some data in some structured format, and we can read it. So a couple of things, just like writing to the files, apply to reading from files. We still have to use the same include fstream as we did before. So let me jot that down. And this is for stream, and this is for all of the file stream objects, just like the console stream objects, CIN and FIN. Another thing to remember is that when we declare our object, this time we will use if stream. The I is for input file stream, as opposed to what we just used in the other video, off stream for output. So just think input and output. Also, this is golden. Call your file output object fin, because that makes it seem real easy when we're working with CIN and now suddenly FIN. They look and feel the same, and we will understand their functionality immediately. So get used to these things. Now, once we do this, let's actually start looking at how to go about reading from a file. And it starts with the concept of what is the read head. The read head is just like a needle on an old LP album. It's just going to sit, and wherever it currently is, that's what it's currently listening to and retrieving. Well, a read head is the same thing. When we first open the file, that read head is pointing to the first character in that file, the first line, the first character. Then when we do some type of a read operation in our code, and for us, this is going to be with a fin, it is going to do just like CIN does, which is read the entire line, including the return character. So if we do a fin here and put it in some variable, then it's going to consume this line of data, so to speak. So we're done with that. And now the read head has moved and is pointing to the next line, first character. So just remember that behavior. Where is the read head, and what is it currently pointing to? If it's pointing to a number, we can use fin. However, fin is going to follow the same get line rules as CIN does. If we happen to have a data item here that's got a space in it, let's say there's a data item there with a space and then another data item, perhaps a first and last name. Well, fin is going to exhibit the same problematic behaviors as CIN did. So if you remember getLine, that's what we would use to get data that might have a space in it, and that would just be this way. GetLine fin, comma, var1. And this is the exact syntax as before, except we're just substituting right here. We're substituting fin for CIN. Now, another thing to remember about reading files is that CIN ignore thing. Anytime you have a CIN in your program followed by a get line, then you've got to use CIN.ignore right before the get line. Okay, we remember that behavior. Well, fin is no different. We're going to have to, if we get something in here, fin, and then later maybe we get line something from fin, comma, name perhaps. Then right here, we'll have to do a fin.ignore. Again, that's because we are mixing a fin and a get line in our code. And the rule is fin.ignore has got to go somewhere between these two statements. And the easiest place to do that is just immediately before the get line. All right, well, let's take a look at some code and see how this will work in action. We'll start just with our setup. So take a look at the mandatory housekeeping things. We have got fstream included here. We've got our input file object declared here with fin, exact same context, syntax, I should say, as the output file in the previous video. And then because we're good developer citizens, we've got fin.close right here, which is exactly what we need. Okay, well, let's get busy coding. And what shall we do? Let's start simple. Okay, I've got my input.txt file here. And I'm just going to put a couple of integers in it. And I'll save the file real quick with a Control S. So I've just got 6 values in there. And because we know that it is 6, we could use a for loop for this. However, I'm going to fast forward our learning, and we're going to go right to the while loop extractor. What does that mean? Well, the while loop has a special extracting feature in it, where when we use CIN or fin or getLine, with the while loop, in conjunction with the while loop, what happens is if we run out of data elements in the file, the while extractor is smart enough to just stop. So we don't have to test for the end of the file. It's going to be tested automatically for us. We don't automatically have to, count the number of lines. It's just not important. It's just going to keep on going down and down and down until it runs out. So let's do that here. We're going to do a while, and I'm going to show you the special syntax here. There it is, and let's get an int declared here for a value. And then let's take a look at this code. You'll see here that the output to the console is exactly what we had input. So we had taken our code from this file and then processed it and then sent it to the console here. And this shows that it was successful because we have all of these numbers. Okay, that's easy enough, showing how it works. Let's try and figure out something else a little more interesting to try and code. Here's some code that will just read all of those values. We're going to count how many values, and we're going to just check for the maximum. Nice and simple. So here's our same housekeeping code. Here we're just going to track the value that's extracted from the file. So we'll have it in our hand as value. And then we'll have a counter. Let's initialize that to 0. And then we'll have also a max variable to hold the maximum that we find. All right, here is that special construction. Remember this, because this is going to save your life. While fin value. And then everything else in parentheses there, in braces, and make sure that it's all indented. Here we check for the max. And there's that code to check for the maximum. Then we simply output the value here to the console. We increment the count. And then after that loop is done, we then can output the maximum found. Let's also then output the count as well and see what we got. Let's see if it matches then what's in the input file. This is saying that there's 7 values. So here in the input file, yep, there are in fact 7 values that are found. So good deal. So this is indeed working. And let's see. I think the key points to highlight is just how easy it is to keep track of these numbers. All of our processing is always going to be inside this while loop. Anything outside of it, like here and here, that's just all going to be reporting. Statistics reporting, end of run reporting, etc. But the The main processing engine is going to be that while loop right there. Okay, so I have an idea. Guess what it is? Let's first look at the concept of records. Records, a single record is a collection of data attributes that relate to the same thing. So in our code here, for example, we've got this database. So all of this data in our external file, and we'll see that here in a minute. And it looks like it starts with a string, and then next it has another string, and this one has a name with it, and that name has a space in it. So right away that tells us we can't use FIN for this. And then it looks like we have an integer, and then the data looks like it repeats for somebody else. And sure enough, it does. This data is concerning Mickey Mantle, while this data here is concerning Mickey Mouse. So we call one of these entire collections of attributes a record. So this is one record, and in it, it's got 3 elements. 3 data elements, 3 items, 3 attributes. Doesn't matter what you call it. It's got 3 components to a single record. So we'll have to remember this idea when we code, because we're going to have to code all of this in a loop. And we'll have to make sure that the loop every single time processes these 3 items. Otherwise, the loop might process this item, this one, this one, this one, and then the next time around, it's expecting to get a part number first, but it already read this one, and it's going to actually read a name instead of a part number and get all messed up. So we have to make sure that we've got read operations covered for each expected read. So what does that mean for us? It means that we darn well better inside this while loop here, we need to have at least 3 extraction operations. Actually, we need exactly 3 extraction operations, 3 extractions. First will be for a string, this string right here. The second will be for another string. The third will be for an int. And because this first string here, because it's guaranteed not to have spaces, we can use FIN for that. We know a little bit about the data. We know that there's not spaces in some of these, like ID numbers. However, for the name, there definitely is a space in there, so we're going to have to use a get line. And then for an integer, we just simply use fin again. So this tells us we'll have a fin, a get line fin, and then another fin, all within this loop. So we've got the 3 extractions that we need for number 1, number 2, number 3. Now, I just mentioned the idea of fin.ignore that matches sin.ignore, and we're going to have to do that here. It goes right before the get line. So right here, we're going to do a fin.ignore to flush that keyboard buffer, just like we did with CIN. Again, the rule for that is if you're mixing CIN or FIN with getLine anywhere in your code, then you've got to use FIN or CIN.ignore right before the get lines. And you just have to do it once before the first get line. If you have another get line right after it, you don't have to do it again. Just if there's a CIN followed by a get line, it's that get line that you've got to clear the buffer for. So let's look a little bit more into the code that we'll use. We have to remember we're first going to use a fin, and that's to get the part number, the ID number of the person, like CA2416F. Then we have to use a get line for their name. And then we'll use fin again for that quantity. So suppose like these are baseball cards and we're just cataloging the name of the player, some kind of a serial number, and then the quantity. So suppose that's what we're reading. So we have to do our extraction operations in this exact order: a fin, a get line, and a fin. And then let's not forget right here, since we are mixing and matching, let's put a fin ignore right here to remind us. Okay, now our while loop is going to extract the first element of the record, this one. Let me say that again. The while loop header is going to extract the first attribute with this while fin, and then let's go into, how about card number? Or let's say card ID instead of number. I think that'll fit a little bit better. Okay, so this extracts the card ID, so we can almost just check that one off completely here because it has been processed. The next thing is we've got to put a get line in there. Okay, so let's do that. Let's put a get line. And this is going to go from fin, and then let's go to, how about card name? So there's that get line. There is the second read operation we're required to do, the second extraction, and we've got to do one more for that quantity. So let's go ahead and get that in. So we'll do a fin, our fin operators again, and how about card quantity? And then our while loop is done here. Now, I actually shouldn't say that, because inside the while loop here, then in this part of our code is where we would do extra processing. Maybe this is where we will output a table or output the data to another file, or start doing some kind of statistics. So with this setup, let's actually start to code this now, okay? So here is our input.txt file. You'll see that we've got one record, two records, 3, 4, 5 records. So we'll expect our output to have, groups of 5 in them. Let's start taking a look at our code now. And let's first set up our input.txt file. And there is our code for that. We will use an if string data type to declare this fin object, and then we bind it here to input.txt. And that which we open, we also close. Let's be good citizens and close our input files when we're done with them. All right, now our job was to read these. And what I'm going to do is copy just one of these down here. I'm going to put multi-line comments around them so this isn't compiled. And this will just serve as a reminder for us about what we need to use. We said this was going to be a fin, this was going to be a get line, and this was going to be another fin. So let's start with that while loop now. And it looked like this. Let's go ahead and declare some variables. So we'll do a string for card ID, and we'll also do a string for the card name. And we'll do an integer for the card quantity. QTY is for quantity. Okay, this first extraction is done. This actually extracts it. So now the read head is pointing to the next line down, which is it's pointing right here to this M in Mickey Mouse. So we've got to capture that next. And since it's got a space in it, we'll use getLine. So we'll do fin, card name. The fin says, okay, where are we getting the data for this getLine? This says go to the file. And then card name is where we will plant the data that we just plucked out of the ground. Let's do the next one. And this will be the final read operation. We're going to fin that quantity. Now, remember that rule we mentioned. If there's a fin followed by a get line, just like if there's a CIN followed by a get line anywhere in your code together, then follow that rule. Right before the between those two, you've got to put a CN ignore or an FN ignore. And it's most convenient to do it right in front of the get line, right on top. Well, now that we've got this, let's just output these to start and just see what kind of data we actually ended up with. And let's see how this runs for us. And there's all the data that is output to the console. You'll note in my output, the formatting, I just had the card ID as the very first thing to output here, followed by just the card name and a space separating those. And then right here, I have just a little string to do the first opening parenthesis, and then there's the closing parenthesis, and then I've just got the card quantity right there. So pretty simple output. And the important thing to note is that our file operation was successful. Let's put in another record here. I'm just going to kind of make things up. Monty Mustard is now joining this. So I've added that now, and I don't have to alter my code at all now because it's just going to automatically read until it hits the end of the file. So I run it, and now I get good old Monty Mustard there as another record in the file. Then from here, you could just manipulate that as much as you want. I'm going to throw us a challenge here, though, and do something interesting. So the first thing, though, is this REPL is available down here in this page, so you can see this and follow along. And then we're going to dance a little bit in the next REPL, and I'll show you a quick demo of something else that's kind of cool. Okay, here's the stretch challenge. Are you ready? I want to also output exactly what is on the console to another file. Let's think about that. We're going to have then both an input file and an output file. And yes, you can do that. You can mix and match them. Just keep track of what you're doing and what your file object names are. You can have two separate input files. Just call one of them fin1 and the other fin2. And then when you do your fin and the extraction, just make sure that you're using fin1 or fin2 so it goes to the right file. Now, the little trick for us to do here is when it comes time for us to actually write this to the file, I'm just going to duplicate exactly what is there and just do FOUT. You'll see we are getting a red squiggly line because that FOUT object hasn't yet been declared, but this is the main part. We want to have identical code that outputs the same thing to the console and to the file. Now let's get some housekeeping in. Let's go ahead and declare that output file off stream, and we'll do FOUT. And let's just have, I'll call it output.txt. Nice and simple. So there's count and there's FOUT, and we did a fin.close down here. Let's also do a FOUT.close. We've got to be good citizens of our digital assets and close that which is opened. Okay, I'm going to run this now, and you'll see we get the same output there to the console, the exact same output. However, we have a new file now. So look right here at output.txt, and it's the exact same thing as the console. And isn't that cool? We have diverted console output to go two places at once. So a good demo showing both an input and an output file at the same time. Okay, team, I hope this is enough to get started. Good luck, and you'll find file operations really, really easy, and you'll find them very, very useful. It's a great utility, especially if we want to just save and preserve some data somehow. All right, good luck, everybody.